This will be extreme web performance for mobile devices. My name is Maximiliano, right? You can call me Max if you want. And we're going to work here for the next hour and a half with the mobile web, okay, and different browsers, and performance for the mobile web. First, I'm a mobile web developer. I'm from Argentina, right? Far away. I have been working with mobile devices since 2001. Long time ago. I'm working with the web since 1995. So I have written some books, jQuery Mobile and Programming the Mobile Web from O'Reilly Media. And also I'm working on a new one, High Performance Mobile Web, and a mobile HTML5 video training that is on O'Reilly. So I'm also the guy behind this website, mobilehtml5.org, where you can find information about compatibility between each HTML5 API or ability and each mobile browser. So all the slides, all the links that I will mention, and also some live tests that you can run on your phone are available on that URL, right? Firtman.github.io/fluent. So the idea here is that some of the things that we're going to cover, if you have the phone with you, that I guess you have, then you will be able to try some things there, okay, in terms of performance. Also, a lot of links to get some apps, tools, and maybe some data that you can get from different websites. So you will have all the links there. Questions? Yes, please. I will leave some time at the end. Also, I will be doing some office hours tomorrow. And also, I will be here the 3 days, so you can catch me up. So we will cover 5 topics. So the mobile web today, performance on mobile, or the relationship between performance and the mobile web, tools, then initial loading and perception, and responsiveness and experience, okay? Remember, our goal will be extreme performance for mobile devices. So let's start. Before that, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the web performance optimization techniques. So these are techniques from a front-end perspective to increase the performance and the perception of performance of our website. That usually leads to more conversions. And it's one of the most important things on a website today to have sales or registrations or visits, okay? So I don't have time here to get into all the details of web performance optimization, but we are going to work with this on the mobile web. So the mobile web today. So we're going to see platforms and the Android problem, okay? So if I ask you about platforms, I'm pretty sure that you will say, okay, it's iOS and Android. Unfortunately, it's not so simple. And I'm not just talking about other platforms, but I'm talking about maybe iOS and Android, but inside iOS and Android, it's not so simple. There are a lot of information sources available out there to get information about the market share in terms of web browsing. So you have all the links there, so you can get that raw data from yourself. But I did the research on all these websites, okay, to try to get some perspective about how the mobile web looks like today. And this is how it looks like in terms of, let's say for now, OSs or a mix between OSs and browsers. So half of the users from a mobile phone are browsing the web on iOS, okay, iPhone, iPod Touch, and roughly 40% on Android. Then we have Windows users, Opera users that are in different OSs, and others, okay? When talking about iOS, probably you are thinking on Safari. Safari is the only browser available for iOS. Maybe we can discuss about Opera Mini or even Chrome on iOS. But Safari is basically the only browser, as we know, on iOS. But I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but right now, 12% of the browsing from an iOS device is not from Safari, but from a different app. For example, from Facebook, or from Twitter, or even from Chrome on iOS. So now on Facebook, on iOS, by default at least, when you click on a link, you are not going to the browser. You are browsing that link inside Facebook. And that's using the web view. And I'm sorry to say, the web view is not exactly Safari. Okay, it has a lot of things in common, and a lot of things that are really, really different, mostly with performance, okay? So performance is different on a web view than on Safari on the same device. And in terms of versions, that also means different APIs and different things that we can do in terms of performance. Right now, today, we have 80% of iOS user on the last version, version 8, and 20% on 7, roughly. So the chart looks like this. So that half of the chart is a mix between in-app iOS, so that's Facebook, Twitter, and other apps, Safari iOS 7, Safari iOS 8. Now, if we jump into Android, the first thing that you might have in your mind is Chrome, okay? Okay, Android, Google, Chrome. So is Chrome the only browser available for Android? Unfortunately not. So in terms of market share, so there are 15 browsers for Android. But in terms of market share, so people using those browsers, we have roughly half of the user on Chrome and half of the users on something called the Android browser. Okay, so this is the old browser that were in Android up to Android 4.3, that is WebKit based. It's not Chromium at this point. It's terrible in terms of performance, unfortunately. And it's not available anymore since 4.4. But we're going to see that it's not so simple anyway. Fortunately for us, if we see some stats, we can realize that Android browser is going down and Chrome is going up around 1%. And we are now at the end of the chart, fortunately for us. Okay, so now Chrome is crossing over Android browser. So with time, we will have more users on Chrome. And Chrome is a much better browser in terms of performance and APIs that we have available that will help us offering a better experience. So even if you look into some tests, this is html5test.com, okay, you will see how different these browsers are, even on different versions of Android. So the first three there is Android browser and on different versions, okay? And finally Chrome, the last version that we have right now, so it's much different, okay? Sometimes we are talking even on the same device. How many of you are Samsung users? Okay, like 10%. Well, maybe you recognize that little icon there, the internet, okay? So that browser is not even Android browser. So most of the data that we have mention that this browser is Android browser, but it's not really Android browser. It's another browser that its name is really internet, okay? That's the name. It has different versions. It depends on the device that you have. So 1.0, 1.1, 1.5, 2.0, and it's Chromium based, but with different versions of Chromium, with a lot of bugs, a lot of problems, okay, a lot of false positives. So it says that an API is there, but it's not really working. And I know a lot of people with Samsung devices that they're not using Chrome, even seeing the logo there. So LG also has a similar situation, for example, on the G3 and the G4. So this is a screenshot, right? On the same device, on the same phone, two browsers running at the same time, and you can see the HTML5 test report that is different. Okay, so it's a different browser. So that means that you should test and debug your websites there too, because you have people using those browsers. So at the end, we are talking about half of the Android users on Chrome, 30% on the old Android browser, and now around 20% using the Samsung browser, okay? And now on Facebook on Android, it's also doing something similar than on iOS. So when you're clicking on a link, right, on Facebook, you are not going to the browser. You are seeing the website inside Facebook. And of course, you have the option to open the website on the browser. You can disable that option. But by default, it's enabled, at least for some users. I'm not sure if it's all the users or not yet. But that means that in this case, Facebook is using the web view. The web view, roughly, is like a browser that you can use inside a native app. It's not exactly that, but let's say it's that. So the web view on Android, it's a problem. It's a bigger problem compared to iOS because you have around 8 different versions of web view. It depends on which phone do you have. The web view is different. It can be WebKit-based or it can be Chromium-based on different versions, and always harming performance compared to for example, the latest version of Chrome. So the mobile web, as you can see, it's a little bit more complex than you might think. So it's not iOS and Android. It's more complex than this, okay? So we have a lot of people browsing the web on different scenarios. And you need to test, debug, and try your websites and web apps on all the options, or at least as many options as you can. Because if not, you are losing users and probably money. That's the worst part. So the mobile web today, you need to understand the real ecosystem. It's not iOS and Android. And it's not even a desktop browser that you resize. Okay, it's different than that. You have different Android browsers. It's not Chrome. Okay, at least not only Chrome. And don't think that you're an average user. All we here are not average users. In terms of the device that we are using, in terms of the browser you're using. I'm pretty sure that here we might have a lot of Firefox users on Android. But that's not what happens outside, right? This room, unfortunately. So, and we are not average user in terms of the data plan that we have, in terms of the kind of connectivity that we have. That's another thing. And the last thing here with the mobile web is that everything is going to change, right? In 6 months, it's going to be different. So embrace the change. That's my first suggestion for you if you want to survive in this mobile web world. So now let's talk about performance with mobile. So here we are going to mention perception, the differences that we have with, let's say, the classic web. We're going to talk about cellular networks a little bit, and finally about responsive web design. Okay, big topic here. How many of you are working or are about to work with responsive web design? Let's see here. Ooh, like 95% of the people. Okay, you need to wait 10 minutes probably. Because you can read this article I have written for Smashing Magazine, right? You may be losing users if responsive web design is your only mobile strategy. And I will explain that later, okay? But that's a big problem that I'm seeing right now in the market. And it's a problem that might be affecting you. I'm not saying that it will affect you, it might affect you. There is a good chance that you might have a problem there. So first, let's talk about perception, okay? From the ideas in usability, from a user's perspective, something that is immediate means that it's inside 100 milliseconds. So at least in 100 milliseconds, if you send a feedback to the user, it will be immediate, okay? And the other big thing here, the big number here is 1 second. After 1 second that you are not giving the user feedback, you are starting to lose the user. So you as a user, you are losing your mind, basically. So you keep your flow of thoughts only with 1 second. After 1 second, so let's say I'm typing a URL, after 1 second of nothing, I'm starting my brain start to think on something else. Okay? I don't know, lunch, dinner, wherever. And we are losing the user. Okay? And that's a problem. And it's a problem on mobile, because on mobile, it's very, very easy to get out of the website quickly. Okay? So another interesting information here is that after half a second, we are increasing user frustration in 26% on a mobile phone. Okay? So that's a lot. And why do we need special care on mobile? There are some, let's say, obvious situations, such as CPU and GPU are different. Memory is different compared to a desktop, again, you are not average users. I know you're thinking, but I have a quad core with 4 gigabytes of RAM. But that's not the average user. In fact, in average, the difference is in 5x. So that means that, for example, on CPUs are 5x slower than on average desktops browsing the web today. Then we have Wi-Fi. Okay, so the phone can browse the web through Wi-Fi, and on some situations, roughly 40% of the time, we are working on public spaces, public Wi-Fis. Okay, for example, conferences. So you know how Wi-Fi works on conferences. Okay, so it's something that you need to care about. Okay, you can't solve the problem, but you can embrace the problem and try to offer some kind of a solution. Then we have cellular connections, of course. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, we have 4G now. So if we have 4G, we don't need to worry about performance. Well, let me tell you this first. So I'm traveling a lot doing conferences and training for companies and organizations. And I have just reached a milestone. 50 countries visited. Okay, so I have visited 50 different countries. And 4G is not there. Okay, 4G is not there. And the data also says that thing. Official data says that only 4% of the users globally are on 4G right now. On US, you can see that it's roughly 30%, but it's 30%, it's not 90, okay? Even on US. But globally, look at Western Europe, right? On Europe, it's just coming right now. It's not there yet. Another thing here is that even if you have a 4G phone and you have a 4G plan with your carrier, 30% of the time, 4G is not available. So 30% of the time, you are downgrading to 3G or 2G, right? Maybe you think, well, this is going to change quickly. Maybe in the next year, we will have maybe half of the users worldwide with 4G. Well, that's not the predictions. For example, this is the prediction from Ericsson that in 4 years, for the 85 in USA will be in 4G, and in Europe only 30%, right? In 4 years. So we still have a long trip to a full 4G scenario. And when we are talking about 4G, 3G, and 2G, usually we think about bandwidth. Okay, and yes, you can see that here 4G, this is the orange one, it's nearly 8 megabits per second. Okay, it has much more bandwidth than 3G, 2 megabits per second, or even 2G. But that's not the problem when we are talking about the mobile web. Because when we are browsing the web, usually we are downloading small files, a lot of small files. Okay, so having more bandwidth is useful for Netflix or YouTube because you are downloading big files, video files. But when we are working with the web, it's making a difference, but not a big difference. And the thing that is making a real problem here is the latency, something called the round trip time. Because we are using wireless networks, okay, information needs to go up and down. The latency is basically a dead time for us for each request that we are doing. Okay, it's the time that, so look here, in 2G, it can be up to 1 second. 1 second of nothing before the first byte appears from the server. Per request, per file that you are downloading. On 3G, it's better. It's between 150 and 450. And in 4G, it's between 50 and 250, roughly, milliseconds. But if you compare that with the home connection, okay, you can see that 4G has a bigger latency, around 4 to 5 times bigger. So even on 4G, that only 4% of the people globally are using, even on 4G, the latency is bigger. And this is our problem. This is our bigger problem, okay, to get the performance. Because the latency is always there. Okay, that's the bigger problem compared to classic web development. Another problem here, look at this. This is from Akamai, information from Akamai. So 91% of the people, so 9 out of 10, on Wi-Fi with a mobile phone are using Safari, Chrome, or Android browsers. Okay? But when we move this to cellular connections, it goes down. Okay? To 7 of 10. And that is because we have Opera Mini and other non-Android, non-iOS browsers, such as our friend Internet Explorer. Okay? So when we are talking to people that are not using Wi-Fi, they're using just 3G or 2G, okay, we have more people there using browsers that maybe you don't know about. Okay? So latency is important and it's not going anywhere for a couple of years. So we need to deal with this. This is our biggest problem. Okay? The other thing is responsive web design. Okay? 90% of you are working or will work with responsive web design. Well, responsive web design, I think like when you're working with this, you feel really good, right? You are really, really happy doing this. Right? That's you working on responsive web design. The problem is that that's not the reality, right? So if it's working in that situation when you resize the browser, it doesn't mean that it will work on a real phone. There are a lot of situations, a lot of examples about this. So responsive web design is a tool. It's a great tool. And don't get me wrong. Every website in the world today will use responsive web design in one way or the other. Okay? The problem is that when you're thinking of responsive web design as a goal, so I need to achieve responsive web design, but you are losing the focus. The real focus here is not responsive web design. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about resizing the browser. Only you. Sorry to say this. So even users don't care if your site is responsive. We can go now outside, go to Union Square, and ask people, do you prefer a mobile website, a responsive mobile website? They don't know about that. They don't care. Okay? But they do care if your site is fast. If you can deliver a fast website using responsive web design, great. But your goal is not being responsive. Your goal is being fast and mobile compatible and usable, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Then you use tools for that. And on some situations, responsive web design is a good tool. And on other situations, it's not enough. Okay? So change your goals. So today, responsive web design differs in terms of how many websites do we have out there. If we are talking about the top 100 or the long tail. On the long tail, roughly 20% of the websites right now are responsive. And on the top 100, it's about 12%. So, but that's not the important thing here. The important thing here is that if we compare responsive websites with classic mobile websites, so the responsive website, in average, uses 43 more requests. Remember the latency? Each request has the latency. 130% of more data transfer. So I'm talking about the same website, in average, being designed as responsive or as mobile only. And we are using 90% more CPU. And I'm not sure if you realize that CPU on a mobile phone means battery. Okay? So you are using, in average, more battery when you're doing responsive. Again, responsive as the only solution to solve the mobile problem. So with mobile and performance, you need to remember that 1 second threshold that we have. Okay? That's important. We need that goal. After 1 second, the user is thinking on something else. We need to keep the user engaged with our content, with our website. We need to remember we have that latency, the round trip time that is not going anywhere. And we need to deal with that compared to the classic web. And we need to test on low hardware, 2G and 3G because we are not average users. And the most important part here, and I prefer to say this and then explain, responsive web design by default, as meaning responsive web design as using that as the mobile solution, usually harms performance on mobile. Okay? I prefer to be aggressive here with that phrase and then explain. So now let's jump into tools. So what tools do you need to work with performance and the mobile web? So here we're going to see the where, so where to test, how to measure loading time, responsiveness, some online tools available, and finally some HTML5 APIs that we have available that will help us providing a better experience. So first, we have this problem, right? Should we use simulators and emulators or real devices? Okay. So of course, real devices is always the best answer, okay, because it's the real experience. But usually we don't have so many devices. And then we have simulators and emulators. I'm not sure if you know the difference between both. Unfortunately, there is no unique definition. But let's say that roughly the community has come to a definition. A simulator is an app that looks like, but it's not really. Okay, it looks like an iPhone, but it's not really an iPhone. And the emulator is like a virtual machine that is running on top of other machine. Okay, it's emulating the hardware and the whole OS, roughly. Okay, because there are a lot of companies that are using the names in exactly the other way. Well, anyway, when we are talking about emulators, we have emulator for most of the browsers. We don't have emulator for the Samsung browser, unfortunately. There is no way to emulate that, okay? As well as some others. If you have a Mac, then you're lucky because you can emulate most of the browsers, but not IE on Windows Phone, okay? I'm sure you're worried about that. But if you're a Windows user or even a Linux user, you have a problem because you don't have a way to simulate or emulate an iOS device, okay? At least officially, and I will explain that in a minute. So I will jump off of the presentation, okay? And I will show you first, I have a Mac, so I'm a lucky user. So we have this app that if you pay attention, okay, the app is called iOS Simulator, okay? So this is not really an iPhone. It's really a Mac, okay? It's a Mac window. And every app that you can see here, by the way, it's a very good simulator. And here we have a mix. We have an Safari emulator. So this is the real Safari code, but that code is being executed in my Mac, okay? Not inside an iOS environment. And let me prove that. If I open Activity Monitor, for those of you without Mac experience, this is like the task manager. So you can see that I have a process running on my Mac called Mobile Safari. It's running on my Mac, okay? If I kill that process, you will see that it's out of here. So this is basically the real Safari running on something that looks like an iOS, but it's not really an iOS, okay? So that's important. Why it's important? Because if we want to test and measure performance, that's my Mac, okay? Yes, it's a real Safari, so in terms of request and simultaneous request, it's the same code base as the one you have on an iOS device, but it's running on your Mac. It's not running on an iOS emulated environment, okay? In the case of Android, you have, I'm not sure how many of you have experience with the Android emulator? Okay, a lot. How many of you are happy with that? No one. That's the problem, right? So here you have a solution. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Genymotion. So all the links are available in the companion website. Genymotion, it's a faster Android emulator. The main problem that we have as web developers, so even I can start it from scratch, and you will see that in a couple of seconds it will be running. The problem is that it doesn't include something called Google Play Services. And that means you don't have a Play Store. And it also means you don't have Chrome. And you can't easily install Chrome there, okay? So that's a problem. But at least we can see Android browser. That's the Android browser, okay? So you can test on the Android browser here, okay? But you have a problem with Chrome, okay? So Genymotion is pretty quickly. You have a free version. You need to read the license. But it's pretty cool for Android browser, And you can emulate or simulate, in this case it should be emulate, different versions of Android, okay? With different versions of the OS, with different versions of the browser. So what happens with Chrome? Well, with Chrome, with Google Chrome, see if I have connection. If I don't have it, doesn't matter. I do have. So if you go to inspect your website, I'm not sure if you have seen this little icon here, that icon there, okay? That's a mobile simulation. So if I click there and enable that, you will see, it's really big, that now I have a simulator here inside Chrome. So I can pick a model here, so I can say, show me an iPhone 6 Plus, okay? And you need to reload, so the server knows that now you are an iPhone 6 Plus. Now you can see that the design is different, okay? You can test here this. I can pick here a Lumia, that's IE. Okay, now I reload, and now the server thinks that I am an IE in a Microsoft Lumia, but the big problem here is that that's not IE running there. It's Chrome, okay? So you need to be very careful about using this simulation, at least with browsers that are not Chrome, okay? So even if you try this on a real Lumia, it doesn't look like that, okay? So in terms of APIs, in terms of the viewport definitions, so it will look different. So this is pretty good for Chrome, because if you take any Nexus 5, well, Chrome on Nexus 5 is pretty much the same code base, okay? So it will be similar to this. So in this case, you can say it's an emulator, okay? But you need to be very careful about this when you are working or talking about other devices, okay? This is just a Chrome that is being resized. And there are other emulations as well, such as touch events and other interesting things that you can do here, but be careful about this emulation, okay? So then you have a link on the companion website where you can see other emulators that you can download for BlackBerry 10 for IE. If you have a Windows 8 Pro computer, you can install a Windows 8 emulator, as well as other browsers, okay? So let's go back here. Now let's talk about some online tools that you have available. Samsung is offering a free solution, okay? That's how it looks like. It's called Remote Test Lab, where you can use for free, again, for free, different real devices over the network. So these are real devices, okay, real devices that you can run. It's not an emulator, that you can run remotely. It's like a remote desktop. So you can see, in this case, how your website looks like on that internet browser, for example. So it's not so easy for performance measurements. Why? Because it's over the network, right? But with the right tools, it can help you if you don't have that particular Samsung device, okay? So you can execute apps, native apps, or websites through the network using this free solution from Samsung. Then you can try that it's one of the best online tools available to verify mobile problems in performance and also in usability that you might have, right? The Page Speed Insights for mobile. It's a free tool from Google that will give you an idea of things you must change and things you may change. And Mobitest, it's a bit outdated in terms of the devices available, but it will give you a performance report on a real iPhone, okay, or on a real Android, if you don't have it, okay, remotely, Mobitest. And finally, you have remote inspectors. So a remote inspector is a tool that will let you use your typical inspector that you are used to on the desktop, okay, with a real phone. So a remote inspector is available on Safari, Chrome, Firefox, that's why I have a great others there, but it's not available for Samsung or Android browser. So you cannot remote inspect that browser. So if you have a bug there, or if you want to profile your JavaScript and see memory problems or memory leaks problems, you cannot do that on Samsung or Android browser. Only on Safari and iOS if you have a Mac. So let me jump here. So I have Safari on my Mac. I have the iOS emulator that I will restart. So it will take my new connection. So basically, when you have Safari open here, from the Safari develop menu, if you don't have that menu, first you need a Mac, okay? On Safari on the Mac, you go to Preferences, you go to Advanced. In Advanced, at the bottom, you select Show Develop Menu in Menu Bar. So when you do that, then you can connect your Safari with a simulator or with a real phone. So if I connect my phone here through USB, you will see that it will appear there with my website. Okay, we'll do it with the simulator, but anyway. So if I do this connection with USB, you will see, and I need to open Safari. Give me a second. There we are. No, I don't want iTunes. Develop. Here you have my iOS device. Okay. So I can connect this to the simulator or to the real device. And in this case, I will connect to the simulator. But it's exactly the same thing. So I can have a simulator on one side and the inspector here. And the same, you can do that with the real phone. And here you have the full inspector. You can, for example, select that inspect button there and then use your finger to just click anywhere on the page and it will go directly there. I didn't click inspect there. So it's like right-click, inspect. You have all the CSS, all the HTML. You can change everything. You have the console. Okay, so I can write any JavaScript here. Right? Hello. Pretty sure that some of you already know this. But the great thing is that you can test this with the real device. And finally, you can use this to measure. For example, I have an example here. It's one of the examples that you can run on your mobile phone later in terms of, in this case, it's I'm dropping some frames while I'm scrolling, right, on purpose, so you can see what's happening here. So I can go to timelines and record this, so then I can try to scroll, and you can see it's not working. I'm trying to scroll, and it's not working really good. So from here, with a real phone, you can see then what's happening, okay? And you can see here I have some JavaScript execution problems, and I can see exactly where they are. Okay, so this is, if you have a scrolling problem, for example, you can, on your mobile phone, that if you have that problem, usually you don't have the problem when you resize your desktop browser, okay, because your desktop browser is far more capable. So you try this, and it's pretty good. And the same thing can be done with Android. Okay, if you're on Windows, it can be a little tricky the first time because you need to download debug drivers for your phone. So the normal drivers are not will not give you remote debugging. But in this case, I have a Mac, so it will work. So if I go here in Chrome and I say more tools, inspect devices, okay, inspect devices, you will be able to inspect, in this case, my real Chrome remotely. And I have 3 tabs here. I can even close those tabs, and I can inspect this. One of the great things compared with the iOS, the Safari remote inspector, is that you have this other little icon at the top right that looks like a phone, that one. So if you enable that, that's basically here a screencast directly from your phone. Okay, let me go back there. So I will scroll here and just scroll in there. And it works in both ways. I can scroll here and my phone is also scrolling. Okay, so this is pretty cool. So you don't really need to see and check your phone directly. Okay. And well, here you can do the same thing. You have the full set of tools available on Chrome Developer Tools, so you can check performance. If you have even the page speed plugin, that if you don't have it, you can go now and install it. You can run page speed directly on your phone. That will give you some hints on this.